Hello again. I'm back for a special report. I am doing a recording about the Aries Ingress, which is just a fancy way of saying the spring equinox. That is when the sun goes into Aries, and it is the new year officially for astrology. And so we use this Aries ingress chart and we pull it up for the capital of our country to do a little bit of predictive research on an astrological basis. So that will be the topic of this recording today. And it is well after March 20th as I record this, because ultimately I did not have enough time to do this when March 20th came around. Um, no. So, but I was thinking about it and that it is an important event to document. And I would like to get some practice with that. So I'm going to bring up the chart that I have created for this event, which is the Aries Ingress on March 20th, 2026, and happening at 10:46 a.m. in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol. And so this is what this chart is showing here. And I am using whole sign to make this a more clean report. For mundane astrology, whole sign works really well because we're not really dealing with the little nuances of your personality and ego, and we're dealing with the collective. And so it seems like a much cleaner report using the whole sign. Normally, I will use Placidus for when I'm reading a person's chart. Or even maybe when I'm reading a chart for a country and I know its birthday and time and stuff. Um, so yeah, so this is the chart, and we've got the sun at 0 degrees Aries here, and it is happening in the 11th house for the United States. So the United States. Our capital is in Washington, D.C., and I'm using the Capitol building just as a landmark. And the ascendant is Gemini. So the ascendant for this spring for our country will be in Gemini, and the ruler of that is Mercury, and that's up here in the 10th house. And in Pisces, and when it was stationing direct, so right at the end of the Mercury retrograde, we have this Aries ingress chart, um, which is interesting because technically it has a little bit of that taste of Mercury retrograde still in this chart, I would say, because Mercury is at the very end of a retrograde period and still hasn't gone back through the shadow. And so it's very interesting that the ruler of this chart, Mercury, is in a conjunction with the North Node in the 10th house. And this is very profound for our country. Um, it's not really a secret anymore that our country is uh, involved in uh, world affairs in an aggressive act towards another country, Iran. And so people will say things like we shouldn't be there and shouldn't be doing this. But here we have this chart that is showing the ruler of the ascendant for this our country for spring for this year in a conjunction with the North Node in the 10th house and in Pisces, and also in a very wide orb conjunction with Mars, which is the ruler of the sun, because we're talking about the Aries Ingress. So the two rulers, the two main rulers of this chart are in the 10th house and in Pisces. And it says a lot to me about what is going on currently, even though it seems to have just begun, right? We aren't sure how long this is going to be going for. But looking at this chart, I would like to say that it looks like it's an evolutionary step. And evolution isn't always perfect. It's actually asymmetrical. When you think about it, in order to walk forward, first you use your right foot and then the left foot, then the right foot and then the left foot, right? And back and over and over and over again. It's the only way you get anywhere is by moving these feet one at a time. Left, right, right, left, right. And that's how the pendulum swings. We talked about it that way in politics very, very often throughout the time. Um, Throughout all time, we talk about the pendulum swinging back and forth. And really, this is just another way of describing how evolution moves forward. Truly. So, if our if this was switched and the ruler of the chart and the ruler of the sun were conjunct the south node, I would be more apt to say that we shouldn't be doing what we're doing as a country. And, I mean, some people don't identify as we anymore as a country. So there is that also. Um, the Gemini ascendant does seem to talk about a split into two. And so we will probably just continue to see that there are two tribes coming out of this time, which is really obvious right now. It has been super obvious. But here is this chart signifying that it is evolutionary. Um, so yeah, it's really interesting also for me to be looking at this chart and looking at Mercury and Mars both in Pisces, because Pisces is about the ocean, um, like large bodies of water, large ships on the ocean, and oil, right? And what has all of this been about? Um, we are now, as I record this, we have been told that there is a ceasefire agreement for 2 weeks, and it is involving the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know how to say that correctly, but it is the area where big boats go through a very narrow strip of water to transport goods, energy, Oil is energy uh, for many different countries. In most of Europe and I believe China and Russia all are very dependent on this area. Uh, the US is possibly also, but there's been information about the strategy that's been taken here. Um, so the strategy, as signified by Pallas Athena, who is conjunct Mars. Pallas Athena, now she won't be going to war without some kind of strategy. And Mars has uh like gotten her involved, you know, because Mars is about taking action. And Mars in Pisces is a little bit more weak. Not entirely all the way weakened, but Mars isn't quite as strong in Pisces as it could be, especially considering that Aries season is opening right at this moment of this chart. Yeah. So we have Pallas Athena there with Mars. And so Mars is taking strategy with all of this action that is going on. And there are there's plenty of talk about the strategy on one side and the strategy on the other. And because it's wartime, time of war. We really it's not it's it's really not hidden. I don't know how else to say that. This word war is on all of our lips right now. And really, that has to do with Aries season being so loaded up with all the planets. And we can see here at the beginning of Aries season, as the sun is going into Aries here in this moment, it is conjunct Neptune. And here's another sign that oceans, big ships, and oil, and like the Navy will be involved. Not just our Navy, but this is a chart that is about the United States, really. So we are really actually focusing on our perspective here. And I do this from the perspective of the United States because this is my home and this is where I've grown up. I really don't know enough about other countries to be speaking for them. So this is why I'm mainly sticking to just the path of the United States with this chart. So getting back to this loaded Aries section here. So with the sun and being conjunct Neptune and also Saturn in the 11th house for this chart, um, we're talking about larger communities, um, and in a way, our hopes and dreams, our Mm, this is very much about defending um, our concept of freedom and independence. because it's a concept that the United States has always been trying to mull over and over. Um, and as a concept, um, we want to make it a reality also. So we've got Neptune with the spiritual aspect and the idea land. We've got this idea um, that, well, one of the reasons why people came to this continent was to be able to worship whoever, whatever, however. And so religious freedom was actually a very huge deciding factor for when people were deciding to leave their homeland behind, to come to a new continent that they knew nothing about. And they had to put a lot of faith in that. And and then when they get here, they start building the structure for that. And that ends up, in a way, killing the dream. Because once you start putting something into a reality, into a foundation, into the box that it needs to live in order to exist, that is very much Saturn. Um, you have to kill some of that dream. Some of it ends up um, just not translating very well. So we are back to this concept, back to these ideas and hopes, dreams about who we are as a people, um, connected through this idea of like what is freedom, what is independence, what are hopes and dreams, even in this state of chaos. Um, you know, Seeing that Aries is the cusp of the 11th house. The What comes to me ultimately is that Aries, Mars, ultimately believes that you have to fight for your freedom. And Mars will ultimately believe that you have to fight for the boundaries, to keep your boundaries. And um and all of that is really definitely going on right now. There's no denying that. And it's just interesting that the planets up in the sky are just, it's like they're just reflecting back to us what it is that we're going through. And what I've seen when I do predictive work with astrology is that in order to really predict what's going to happen, diving deep into the psychology is where we find the motivation for things to actually happen. So when I look at this chart and I think about the psychology of all of the Americans that are living with the crushed hopes and dreams, I'm looking at this chart and seeing a bit of a revival for that spark, passion. Uh, People want to be able to dream again and have hopes and lofty goals. We've been living through a very dark time, and coming out of that, it feels very chaotic. So that's why the energies and the way it is, the way that everything's going to make you feel for the next few years, even. because we've got all kinds of Aries action going on. The way that you're gonna feel about it all is gonna feel very chaotic because for a long time we had um, Neptune in Pisces, and we were all comforted and lulled to sleep by the dream of just surrendering, letting it all go, um, not necessarily paying attention to the direction that we're drifting in. And that seems like what has been going on. And then all of a sudden, we're waking up and we're reaching for our compass and our map and trying to figure out where we're headed. And that's what all this Aries energy is really pointing to. That's what else. So, another really, really big signature in this chart is that the lunar nodes, the north and the south node, are in a T square with Black Moon Lilith over here. And Black Moon Lilith is especially in Sagittarius, um, really describing our shadows as a country that are about our faith, our belief system, our justice system. Um, what else? Religions, religious systems, the shadows, the dark parts are going to be exposed. And of course, that's already happening because this chart happened before Easter. And now, at this point, as I am recording this, we're already past Easter. And what happened for this Easter is that a war was started and a lot of unrest around holy sites. And some of the truth is starting to leak out about what these holy sites are really holding, um, maybe even underground, but it has to do with our evolution with faith and religion, ultimately. And here we have in the United States, we are experiencing having the first pope that's from here, from the United States. And so there is, our country is a little bit more invested in this Roman Catholic thing. And Black Moon Lilith being in the sign of Sagittarius, in this T square with the nodes. And not just the nodes, but also in a square with the rulers of the chart and the sun in Pisces. And Pisces is about spirituality, and Sagittarius is about religion. And Black Moon Lilith being in the sign of religion, it very much says to me that religion loses out on this battle, and that spirituality is going to come out on top, ultimately. And what's the difference? Well, we have spirituality, which is represented by Pisces, and it's very quiet. Um, it's really hard to describe with words what's going on in that realm. It's very boundaryless and place of surrender. And in Sagittarius, it's not quite like that. It's a lot more upholding of knowledge. It's having written things down, and this is a truth because we believe it to be true. And with Black Moon Lilith there, she's saying, ultimately, I believe she's saying that the truth isn't what you think it is. The truth is maybe darker. There's darkness in this truth. And in order for us to evolve properly, because it is attached to the nodes in this chart, and the nodes are in Pisces and Virgo, which is very, very spiritual axis. You know, when uh, in esoteric astrology, Pisces is the zodiac sign for Jesus, and Virgo is the zodiac sign for Mary. And this is the only axis where this exists. This Christ consciousness and Earth goddess uh, energy. So this axis in square with Black Moon Lilith, and Black Moon Lilith is um not she's not down with like lies and deception. Um, she is she is the shadow, right? She is there to remind us that there is very particular power in that shadow realm that should be respected and not played with. Um, yeah, she doesn't like to get played with. And that is one of the more serious aspects going on in this chart that I see. Um, there is a possibility of death associated with this T square with the nodes and Black Moon Lilith. Um, but with Black Moon Lilith being in Sagittarius, any death that I can see in this coming, to me in this chart, uh, is about a death of a faith. Um, you know, because it doesn't work anymore. And one of the reasons why uh, I see this as a death of a faith that doesn't work anymore. And I'm not going to predict which faith because I think ultimately all religions are trying to control people in a way. Because as I was explaining, Pisces is about spirituality and openness and um, receiving the spirit. And Sagittarius has always been about trying to put all of that information into a book. You've got your Bible that has all of the things that we're not going to question, right? We're not going to question these things. And that's really what Sagittarius is about. And with Black Moon Lilith, there's a lot of questioning going on with this Bible or religious text. I say Bible because that is what I'm most familiar with regards to religious text, even though I know that there are many more. And that's also what I'm referring to also is any kind of religious text is a trying to control language so that it can describe spirituality in a way, or trying to control spirituality with language. And I think that's more like what I was meaning to say. And the knowledge, you know, yeah. And what I see happening already, um, because this chart is sort of about our psychology and then things play out from there, is that people have been wondering what is going to happen to my faith, to my religion. What is the future hold for my belief system? Um, no, people aren't actually saying that, but I feel that coming from their hearts. And that is why the fear rises. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about with regards to Aries season. And I'll talk about it more when I come back to talk about the Aries new moon in my next video. But ultimately, Aries season, it will bring up a lot of fear because this is the antagonist of Mars and Aries is fear, fear of not surviving. Because Mars and Aries is about surviving against all odds. And we can see that this fear is definitely been coming up because we have a lot of energy, a lot playing out in Aries. So we are going to see a lot of fear just being thrown around because ultimately this is what motivates Aries, Mars to take action is their fear of not surviving. So this is also part of the story that plays out with people wondering what is the future of their belief system. The other the other thing that signifies this belief system questioning and the evolution of what we believe in is also being shown here with this trine. We have Jupiter in Cancer in a trine to Mars in Pisces. So, Jupiter being in a trine to the ruler of the sun is very important because this is a harmonious energy that will expand on whatever is happening. So we're looking at an expansion, a harmonious expansion of territory, possibly. Because another thing about Aries is territory, um, fighting to protect territory. And when we've got Mars in Pisces, this territory is probably going to be somewhere in the ocean with water. Mm. I think it's really interesting because the talk about Greenland has died down a little bit, but I do want to say that Jupiter in Cancer, which is all about homeland, in a trine to Mars in Pisces, which is talking about territory, um, it might be, it might be that Greenland does join the United States because it might be one of the most harmonious um, things to do during this time. And one of the things that I am looking at with regards to predicting what's going to happen with regard, with all of this stuff and the unrest is that the United States has taken a very strategic action with regards to oil and territory. Um, they may not be a very favorable thing to say right now, but I'm going to say it because this is what the chart looks like to me. I'm not jumping for joy that the United States is acting aggressively again, but I will look at this chart and say, yes, that does seem to be uh, like, what else were we gonna do with all of this Aries energy ending up in the 11th house? And with the two rulers, the ruler of the chart and the ruler of the sun ending up at the 10th house, is very strategic, decisive, out in the open, and it is about our legacy. And I think that even though it's not very favorable to say that the United States will be taking up new territory and have been quite strategic when it comes to military action, but it may come out in the future that this is the truth. Now, during the Aries Ingress, we have the moon in Aries also. And the moon is pretty much conjunct Eris and Chiron in this chart. Now, in the Aries new moon chart, we have an even closer conjunction to Chiron and Eris. And I've been looking at the sign of Aries for a while now, and Chiron has been there for a long time, quite a few years. I think it was, I want to say 2017. No, 2018 when Chiron initially entered Aries and then permanently went into Aries in February of 2019. And so Chiron in Aries has just been patiently waiting for this moment, for this time to be coming around. Chiron is the wounded healer, and um, and when Chiron is activated, we all individually will feel our wounds. Our wounds will be coming up. And for the collective, for the United States, yes, our wounds have been coming up. And the wounds have been about like not belonging, not fitting in. Where do we fit in with the world, the rest of the world? Where do we fit in with each other? This idea of unity doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And that's really Eris um, in there doing that. And so, and I'll be talking about this more in my next video. But the moon in Aries is really triggering all of these wounds to be coming up so that we can finally heal them, though. And so we've got wounds, the United States as a collective has a lot of wounds around war, military, um, you know, we as a country, we don't believe that we should be going into other countries, but we do anyways, and we feel like we have no control over that. And it's very wounding to think of yourself as um, a citizen of a country that your military goes and upsets other countries. It's very like, you feel like you don't belong. You feel like, you know, feel like your country is a bully, right? Even. Um, but what is it that we could heal around that, you know? What could change so that that could be healed? And that's more or less what's coming around for the next new moon. So that would be interesting. Um, it seems like with the way things are right now, um, we're, Americans are very split. We don't necessarily have a whole lot of unity, and there is a lot of evolutionary uh, hard places that we're moving through. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Chiron has just been waiting for this moment. And like I said, it's not really favorable right now to say that what I see is happening evolutionarily. Um, yeah. One more thing, a couple more things about this chart is we've got Uranus on the uh, cusp here of Gemini, coming back into Gemini, and we've got Sedna here too, at the very beginning of Gemini. And these two are technically making a conjunction. And I think that Americans are in for a shock as to our the part that we play in originating like villains, basically. I don't know how else to say that. Um, because Sedna can be kind of dark, and she needs to be appeased when nature is out of balance. And this is sort of what I mean is like um, the ideal of American luxury is very out of balance with nature. And, um, Americans probably don't know that Sedna is upset at us and is um, her. It is said that, I did a video on her a few months ago, and so anybody who's curious more about Sedna can go back and look at my video there, and I do talk a lot about Sedna being in Gemini because Sedna moves very, very slow. And so Sedna being here very much involved in the first house of the this chart is pronouncing the fact that we're out of balance with nature. And with Uranus there, that's about to conjunct her in Gemini once Uranus gets into Gemini, but is already making this conjunction. We will be seeing signs of the the shock of being out of balance with nature. Because these two characters will be working together to wake us up. Uranus wants to wake us up, and because Sedna is suffering, and in her story, in her lore, when she's upset, her hair needs to be combed. Yeah, to soothe her because she is really upset at how she got there. And that's in my other video. But she controls the bounty from the ocean. Um, it's another thing that I'm looking at that when we talk about the Arctic and whether or not the United States will be acquiring an Arctic continent, I think that's really interesting that Sedna is right there on that ascendant. Um, so yeah, it's like Sedna is very much a mystery though, very mysterious. And um I don't necessarily think that Sedna there signifies anything worse than what we are currently going through, because the imbalance is actually creating the imbalance with nature is actually what's creating so much suffering in humanity, actually, because we're animals too, and all of the data centers that are being built are very disruptive to not only the animals that are not us, but the animals that are us. We are very disturbed by these places that get built. And it is the realm where we are most out of touch and in an imbalance with nature is where we decide to plop these data centers down. Um, that seems to be possible a possibility for coming more and more into the forefront with regards to what this chart is saying. The imbalance. Uh, and we also technically here have a opposition, even though there is no line right here, but there is an opposition between Sedna and Black Moon Lilith. It's a very wide 10-degree opposition. But looking at that, we're also seeing where this, like everything that I was talking about with Black Moon Lilith signifying where we need to question where our belief system is taking us, has been, uh, whether it still serves us. Sedna is over here echoing that, but in respect to how we live with nature. So, and again, it's ocean related. Um, so yeah, there is a lot of signature in this chart saying that the oceans and the big naval ships and the Navy and oil will be at the forefront for this year. So, and with regards to our country. And, the South Node being in the fourth house is more of this like letting go what doesn't serve us in our home on the daily, what doesn't serve us. And, uh, you know, another thing that Uranus on the ascendant over here in Taurus could be signifying is a disruption to our resources. Um, and possibly with this trine to Juno, because Juno is about promises kept or not kept. So either promises are broken or promises are kept. And, we've got two earth signs, Juno and Capricorn. Is probably very like wants to keep her word. She wants to keep the promise. So some kind of promise is kept, and in this trine there's a harmonious aspect to Uranus. So when I say disruption to resources, it is probably it's going to be evolutionary. Um It's one of those things where something bad happens, and then later on you find out it was actually probably the best thing that could have ever happened to you. Well, Uranus tends to be like that a lot. Uranus tends to say, you know what, this is actually not your path, and let's just, we're going to disrupt it. And so that you can kind of like you end up like shaking your head wondering what happened when Uranus comes and does the thing. So in a harmonious aspect though to Juno, um and with Uranus technically still in the 12th house, we've got another signifier of oceans and ships and oil. So who knows? Maybe we'll be surprised by allies that will keep their promises. That sounds nice, right? Yeah. So let's see. Is there anything else? I don't. I think I went over all of the points. I wanted to make sure that I touched on all the points that I saw um, because it's interesting to look at the headlines of what's going on and then look at these charts. Yeah, I'm not going to go into my belief system in this video. I'm not going to go into that. Um, but there definitely seems to be a different story in this chart compared to the hysterics of headlines. Um, so um, hopefully we just start to see things working out in the way that they're meant to be working out with the strategy at hand, but it might take a while. Like, you know, this new moon that's coming up is going to be a good trigger for the Aries stuff to be popping off, and the planets will have moved forward a bit. So we'll see, we've got Mars going into Aries soon, and uh, when everybody joins the party, that's when we really start to see what's popping off. So, in my next video, like I said, about the new moon in Aries, there will be a lot more to look at. So, but there was already a lot in this. So, I am really grateful for everyone who stayed to see what I could see. And um, I really appreciate people who have decided to follow me. That is so nice of you. And if you can like or share my video, that really helps. Um, I really enjoy doing these. Um, yeah, let me stop sharing. Stop the share. Here we go. Hi. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with me and going over this chart. And we'll see. You know, I will probably do an update for the summer solstice. So that should provide some more information on where our country is headed. Because I know that there's a lot of like things to be unsure about right now. It's very not settled, not grounded, and it's hard to say that we're going to feel grounded in a while. This Aries, Neptune staying in Aries for a while is going to be, um, challenging, challenging our sense of like the stuff that we're made of, even, all of that is going to come to pass. So, um, it's been fun. And thanks again for hanging out. All right. Bye. See you next time.